and Secretary Mnuchin, thank you for testifying before our committee today. We have seen proposals to implement a financial transaction tax in both the House and the Senate. In addition, a number of Democrat presidential candidates have either endorsed or are considering a financial transaction tax. These proposals would place taxes on financial transactions typically involving stocks and bonds and derivatives. This tax would result in fewer trades and will lead market participants to look for other ways to avoid the tax. This will both reduce capital gains taxes and might lead to other forms of tax evasion. Additionally, a financial transaction tax has already been tried internationally, and the results have been very poor. In Italy, the tax just raised 159 million euros of a targeted 1 billion euros in its very first year. In Sweden, a tax was imposed in the 1980s, and by 1990, more than 50% of all Swedish trading had moved offshore to London. While proponents of the financial transaction tax argue that it would only affect the wealthy, that is simply not the case. This tax would impact all investors, most specifically and including millions of Main Street investors saving and investing in mutual funds, a retirement account, a child's education, or maybe a pension plan. Secretary Mnuchin, what sort of impact could imposing a financial transaction tax have on the U.S. financial system?
Well, thank you for raising that issue. I share your concern about this potential tax. I think, as you know, the United States is the leader in financial services, in capital markets, and it's something that people come from all over the world to raise capital in the United States. So I am very concerned that that would destroy our capital markets, and the cost to American holders of mutual funds would bear the majority of the cost. Mr. McHenry actually also inquired and wrote us about this, and we've committed to do some work internally and on an interagency basis to study this, to see if we can try to come up with some research on what the impact would be.
Do you believe it would reduce liquidity?
I believe, as I said, I think it would be quite detrimental on many aspects, both liquidity, it would...
What about volatility, market volatility?
Well, I think kind of we may have less market volatility here because we won't have a market here, because
right.
You mentioned it'll go to London and to Hong Kong and to other places where we clearly don't want it to be right now.
And how would this impact overall U.S. economic growth, Secretary?
It would be a burden on economic growth, and more importantly, it would be a burden on all the American taxpayers who already pay taxes and hold mutual funds and have their savings and their retirement in mutual funds.
Of which there are millions, as I said, of Main Street, hardworking Americans in my own 2nd District of Missouri that would be greatly impacted by this. Could this tax result in fewer trades and lead to market participants to look for other ways to avoid the tax, the kind of tax evasion that we've seen internationally in other countries?
I believe it would. It would move money offshore. It would disproportionately hurt pensions, 401ks, and people who are saving for retirement.
Do you believe, sir, that the cost to the Treasury of issuing federal debt could increase because of the potential increase in trading costs and the reduction in liquidity that would occur if this tax were in fact imposed?
Well, if the tax were put on U.S. government securities, it would clearly just raise the cost of the government borrowing. There's no question.
So federal debt would even be affected by this?
It would.
All right, thank you. I look forward to your study, and we do hope that FSOC will do more work and research so that we can be very clear before moving forward with a horribly regressive and detrimental financial tax like this. Thank you so much for your time, and I yield back, Madam